You guys never cease to amaze me. You really, really do. You never cease to amaze me, and I say that part sarcastically and partly with some seriousness, because I do appreciate when you deliver your hot takes and I get to sip on the tea and respond. This is another episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, coming at you from the Beaver County Auto Studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. I am your host, Mike Asti, and for this gold quality broadcast, I'm here to tell you why, while the referees did suck, and trust me, they sucked on Sunday Night Football against the Los Angeles Chargers, the referees are not to blame for the Steelers' loss to those Chargers on national television. Now, the referees absolutely were atrocious. Missed call after missed call, and most of them for the Steelers, but not to say there weren't also some missed calls that went against Los Angeles, and Los Angeles, not San Diego. I know, that was rough, but the Steelers had a 23-7 lead. Now, they end up losing 33-30 off a game-winning field goal. They had a 23-7 lead. In the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, in the history of Heinz Field, the Steelers, who were playing at home, had never lost a home game in which they had a 14-point lead or more. Well, that went by the wayside on Sunday Night Football against those Los Angeles Chargers. That's gone. The Steelers led by 16. A 23-7 lead at one point in that game. Well into that game, by the way. It wasn't as if that was really out of the jump and then things got moving. Well into that game. The Chargers, who scored 20-plus points every game of this season, including the 33 to beat the Steelers, with all but 7 of those thanks to the offense, went through the whole first half mightily struggling. A touchdown on the scoreboard, 20 points, looked like not to be a guarantee for that Charger offense and Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers, a future Hall of Famer, I say, I'll leave that debate for another day, but relatively underrated through his career. He's a Hall of Famer, having maybe his best year of his career this year. And that team scores 20-plus in every game of the year, but had only 7 through a decent amount of that game. And yet the Steelers blew it. Yet they lost 33-30 after a 23-7 lead at one point. Now, instead of being upset about that, or instead of needing the team to improve, instead of hating on the team for giving up that lead, instead of focusing in on the defense for, while playing well through the first half, then collapsing in the second half, namely the secondary, which has been a problem when the Steelers have had problems throughout the year defensively. But while the defense played better than many would expect and was getting complimented, including by myself in that first half, the defense totally collapsed in the second half. Rather than maybe even criticize your future Hall of Fame quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger, who gets way too much criticism at times, and I have to defend him. And just a week ago, I did a show on how he was critical of teammates, even though he's the leader, and I defended him because he has the right to do so, and that can galvanize the team, as if anyone's going to criticize it, would be him being the future Hall of Fame team leader. But he didn't play well in terms of what he can do. He's certainly thrown interceptions that they don't need to have him throw, and that certainly are hurting the team the last few weeks. They're able to rebound against Jacksonville, lose to Denver, lose to the Chargers, overthrowing what was guaranteed to be a touchdown pass to Hunter. That's not on the receiver there. Ben's not going to throw that at the receiver. That's on him. That's a miscue by your Hall of Fame quarterback. Instead of going there, because he certainly would deserve some criticism through the game, instead of just going any myriad directions, or even at Boswell, who misses an extra point after finally getting kind of off the snide, and we know his early season issues that he had, and I was asking Tomlin every week at the press conference, probably got sick of me, but Boswell now, again, having his problems, not giving the consistency of accuracy that he used to give you, that garnered him the contract he now has. Or even Antonio Brown, who had a great first half and then kind of was quiet in the second. Now, of course, getting double covered, they changed up their scheme. They focused in on him a lot more in that second half, but the Steelers didn't adjust, and Juju, who's come up big in many games when Antonio Brown has garnered the double coverage, wasn't able to really get much for himself either in that second half. So there's many different directions you can go. Many of these fans out there, many of the Yinzers, and I'm going to call them Yinzers, decide instead to focus in on the referees. Now, some were funny, some were just asinine. Let's take a look. On Twitter here, this nice little picture of another missed call by the referees. NFL's best, being sarcastic there with the tweet. I'm not going to read these Twitter handles, by the way. I don't need to give you any more followers. They're there on the picture. If you garner Twitter followers from that, congrats. That's about all I'm going to do. Sure looks like illegal hands right there. And I'm not to say it wasn't. Not to say it wasn't a missed call by the referees. Let's go here now. These refs shouldn't be able to continue in the NFL anymore. They shouldn't be able to officiate in the NFL anymore. These are blatant and the reason the Steelers lost. Shaking my head. Misholding there on the one picture. And we know there was even one Charger touchdown. Many Steelers fans were grumbling and tweeting me and many others about holding and missed calls that maybe that touchdown shouldn't have stood. Chargers did have weird touchdowns. One with the ball that was thought to be an incompletion, but somehow batted around and Allen able to come up with it. Maybe missed calls. There you go. These refs shouldn't be able to continue to officiate in the NFL anymore. They shouldn't be able to officiate. Well, there should be punishment for referees when they blatantly miss calls, and there is. And this is funny. This one's not as asinine. This is kind of funny. A look at the refs from the Steelers game tonight. Man, you see a bunch of blind referees with blind glasses on and little sticks that blind men walk with, some seeing eye dogs out there. It's funny stuff. I enjoy that tweet. It's funny. I'm going to enjoy some levity when there's so many hot takes out there blaming the referees directly for the loss. Now, there was a slew of the funny tweets, but there was a lot of the ridiculous tweets. And I'm not to say that if you have an image out there and you can circle it and you can do some work on your own about a missed call, or there's not any legitimacy, not even to say there's not legitimacy to your argument about missed calls on either the Chargers scores or namely, which those tweets didn't focus on, but namely the punt return for a touchdown, which basically won the game, that really changed the tide. The Chargers never looked back from that point on. And as Tomlin said in his press conference today, that special team scores, even maybe more so than defensive scores, can really change the tide of games. And usually when you get a special team score, you're usually winning that game. And that was the case for the Chargers, really changed momentum and led them to victory. And many would bring up there was multiple blocks in the back. In fact, I tweeted it at the time while watching. 2. I saw 2. There might have been more, but at least 2 blocks in the back on that punt return for the Chargers. Now, again, if there's blocks in the back, of course that shouldn't count. However, this is a league where there's going to be missed calls. There's missed calls both ways. This is not the first time a punt has been returned for a touchdown with blocks in the back that weren't called. There's usually holding on every single play. It's only when it's called is it a problem or a penalty or something that needs reevaluated for that team. There's usually blocks in the back on most punt returns or kickoff returns for touchdowns. Look out through history. There's usually blocks in the back. okay? Even blocks in the back on interception returns. There's usually blocks all over the place. They're not always called. When they are, and they are often called, I'll give you, that's when it's a problem. That's when it's annoying. That's when you're going to hate, be mad and hate your team for the block in the back, or be yelling in the opposite direction if your team got called on them and you don't think so. And there's going to be blocks in the back on almost every play, and there were on that one. There were blocks in the back on the Chargers punt return for a touchdown. But just because there's blocks in the back doesn't give the Steelers the excuse you're giving them when you see a tweet like that and many others saying the refs are the reason the Steelers lost. The refs are to blame for the Steelers' loss, or to, number one, be the biggest target of blame, because there's much to blame to go around and many other targets the Steelers fans can have and the media can have, and we're trying to bring those to you, but so many fans out there are still focusing in on the refs as the main target to blame. It's never going to be the case, and it's always going to be lame in the National Football League. Because while there were blocks in the back on that punt return for a touchdown, there also were many missed tackles. It isn't as if the block in the back not being called is a reason to just let the Chargers score and then complain about it later. That's not mature. That's not going to win you games in the NFL when you always know there's going to be missed calls, and the referee's punishment and how great they are is an argument for another day, and they didn't have a good night at all. It was a tough day at the office for the officiating crew, and maybe there should be punishments. I don't know about never officiating in the NFL again, as the one tweeter, but there often are guys taken off games, not given Super Bowl assignments, not given playoff games. There have even been referees fined, referees having to explain themselves as well. So not to say that wouldn't happen here. It has not yet, and it maybe is surprising that was not occurring after this game, a few days later now. But still, there were missed tackles on that punt return too. So yes, there were blocks in the back that should have been called that weren't, and that would have not, that would have called back the touchdown. But there were also missed tackles. So if you see a block in the back, or you're not seeing it in game speed, I'm sure, and you see somebody running past you, looking for a touchdown, you see open space in front, and you're right there, and you have a chance at a tackle, make that tackle. Don't just all of a sudden miss it and then blame the block in the back. Myriad of tackles missed by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and yet the block in the back is where the fans want to go number one. Because again, the referees were bad. They had a rough night. You can blame the referees if you want to throw them in the top five. But the defense collapsing after a 23-7 lead, a 16-point lead, the defense completely collapsing within themselves and allowing Phillip Rivers to just march up and down the field in the second half. Not much else going on offense for the Steelers, only 7 more points after that 23-7 lead for the Steelers. Big Ben overthrowing an obvious touchdown in an open target in Hunter, and a guaranteed score in that first half that if you have that touchdown, Steelers would have won. The block in the back, the Chargers scores that maybe you think shouldn't have been there, the referees, even the Steelers collapse. It wouldn't have mattered. And that's why that you want to build the lead as much as you can. You want to take advantage of dominating a team as much as you can. You never want to let a team get back in a game, but namely, you want to build your lead as much as you can so it wouldn't matter if your defense does collapse as it did on Sunday. Or even going to the head coach and Mike Tomlin for squandering a timeout on a questionable challenge and losing 9 in a row now for Mike Tomlin, I believe, is the stat. So Tomlin's challenge resume isn't the best, and blowing that timeout late in the game that maybe they would need, as he's been doing most of his career with the Steelers, despite having, for the most part, success as head coach here in Pittsburgh. And while you guys are all blaming the referees, and as I throw those tweets out there where some are funny but most are hot takes and asinine, where you're blaming the referees and you're saying the referees cost the Steelers, they robbed the Steelers, that's your number one target. That's not what the Steelers are doing. You heard Cam Hayward right after the game. You heard Ben Roethlisberger right after the game. You heard Mike Tomlin immediately after the game in the post-game press conference, and then again in his weekly press conference that I was in attendance for. Put the referee excuse to bed. The fans won't. You guys won't. That's where you immediately went after the game, and you're still banging that drum. Mike Tomlin and that team aren't going to worry about the referees. They can't control it. They know there are going to be missed calls in every game. You even go back to the New England game last year, the controversy of the Jesse James catch or no catch. There maybe is an excuse to be had there from the referees, but they're not going to let it happen. They're not going to use that as an excuse because they've had referees miss calls for the opponent, and they've had success off of that in won games thanks to the referees blowing calls for the opponent in the past. Every team has. Every team's benefited, and every team has maybe been the victim of referees through the years. Missed calls both ways, and there were in that game, even though maybe more for the Steelers, and I detailed them. There were blocks in the back on the punt return. There was a couple holding calls that were missed. Questionable call missed on the Chargers touchdown. Even Joe Hayden, Jay Hayden for short, but even Joe Hayden going offsides on the first of the 3 game-winning field goals. The last 2 obvious offsides. The Steelers kind of just said, F it. We're just going to go offsides here and see if it's called. But the first one was questionable. I think he was offsides. He did jump and have an early jump and a great shot at the kicker there. But I think he was offsides. But it's questionable. You could argue that. And maybe if that wasn't called as offsides, obviously, then you maybe go to overtime there and maybe the Steelers win the game because in the waning seconds, that would have then been a missed kick. However, again, you should never let it come down to that field goal. Tomlin says it all the time, and I'm going to be with him. You should never let it come down to a game-winning field goal or worrying about offsides or worrying about a call here or a call there or a missed call there or a missed call here or anything to do with the referees or even the opponent controlling things when you have a 23-7 lead at home. Forget the history of the team not allowing comebacks with a 14-plus point lead at home, but this team or any team individually shouldn't allow it. You have a 16-point lead at home. You think you're a championship caliber team. You think you're a playoff contender. You're leading your division. You're facing off against the championship contender, a playoff contender, who also is trying to win their division. And yet you allow them to come back off a 23-7 deficit. As good as they are, as great as that offense is, unacceptable. Unacceptable, regardless of everything else. Purely unacceptable. And the team, Cam Hayward said it. We have a 23-7 lead. The offense scored 30 points. We want to win a championship. Whether we're the best defense in the world or the worst, if we want to win a championship, we think we're a good team, a winning team, and a playoff team. When our offense scores 30 and our offense brings us a 23-7 lead and we're playing well defensively in that first half, only allowing 7 against the quality offense and a Hall of Fame quarterback, then we definitely can't collapse in the second half and allow that team to then come back and win 33-30. I don't care if there's a punt return for a touchdown and missed calls in the mix. Cam Hayward said it. I'm a leader of this team. I'm a veteran. We can't squander a 23-7 lead. We collapse as a defense, unacceptable for us. He took it on the chin, as he should. Ben Roethlisberger, who criticized a teammate and a rookie the week before, and James Washington, who let that be, and it didn't become the drama that it maybe was earlier in the week. It kind of died out because he took it maturely. And maybe he'll get more opportunities now in the future based on some injuries. But Ben overthrew and misfired on what would have been a guaranteed touchdown in that first half. And even though the Steelers had a big lead, you never can have too big of a lead in the NFL, as the Steelers have learned better than anybody else the last few weeks, especially blowing that 23-7 lead on Sunday Night Football primetime television at home against the Chargers. You can't afford to squander points when they're there. And he overthrew a target, overthrew Hunter, was a guaranteed touchdown had he not overthrew him. That's on Ben. That's not on the receiver. And after a week earlier criticizing the receiver who dropped a ball he felt was right on target, saying you got to be better if you want on this field, you're young, you're a rookie, I don't care. He did that as a leader. That's fine. The locker room doesn't care about it. AB even said, you can criticize me, you're a Hall of Famer. But with that said, you got to take it when it's on you, and Ben did. He took the criticism and put it on him when it was deserved because he overthrew that receiver that should have been 7 points, and if it was, Steelers wouldn't have had to worry about the collapse or the referees, and they would have won that game still. Even Tomlin taking it on his own, saying immediately, no excuses, we got to play better. He took the blame when it was there and needed to be taken, and Mike Tomlin is never going to allow the referees to be mentioned. He immediately dispelled it after the game. He did it in his weekly press conference. Sometimes he's fiery and has mentioned referees before and then got fined, and he's even jokingly said he sent too much money to New York and just refers you to Al. Loves to call him on the first name there. Al Riveron. But Tomlin's not going to allow the referees to be the excuse. When you have a 23-7 lead at home and you're a championship contender and a playoff team, you got to hold that lead. I don't care what happens with blocks in the back. You got to make those tackles. You can't allow somebody to run past you for a punt return score. You can't have those missed tackles on that return, even if there are blocks in the back. If there's holding, you got to overcome, whether they miss the call or not. You have a big enough lead. You had a mulligan against the Chargers. You should have been able to overcome. And I'll even let Tomlin tell you, if you don't believe me, you can get it from the horse's mouth. Play some clips here from the weekly press conference that I was in attendance for, told everybody here, everyone in media, and then the masses, that there's no excuses. We got to be better. We got to be better in all three facets of the game. No excuses to blow a 23-7 lead at home, regardless of the referees. The team's not going to blame the referees. Tomlin's not going to blame the referees. By the way, I'm not sure, So I'm going to give you through the fourth wall right now. I was trying to play it off, but I don't know if I can. I had two clips from Tomlin in the weekly press conference where Tomlin immediately opened up by saying, we're not going to blame the referees. Don't worry about the referees. No excuses. We got to be better. All three facets of the game. We can't miss tackles on the punt return, even with blocks in the back. And that's just paraphrasing. But we got to be better. We can't collapse and squander a lead. And certainly defensively in the second half, we got to be better. So if you didn't see those, if they didn't play for some reason here, my board didn't show them playing back to me. Maybe they did, or maybe you saw them 2 or 3 times because I kept clicking. They are on our YouTube channel, What You Should. This will give me an opportunity here for a shameless plug. Click on the subscribe button. Click on the subscribe button. Free to do so. Support Pittsburgh Sports Live, and when you do, it'll make it easier for us to bring this content to you, whether you agree with me or not. It's analysis. It's our opinion. It's reporting. We break news sometimes. We even give our takes. Our hot takes are always steamy, extra fresh, if need be. But click on the subscribe button. Go to us on YouTube at Pittsburgh Sports Live. You can also follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. You can follow myself at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter. And you can bring me any of the hate mail. Bring me any of the tweets, any of the venom you want. I've certainly received my fair share, or anyone else here at Pittsburgh Sports Live or any of our ventures. Whether it be this website, pghsportslive.com, where all this content lives, all the audio content, all the visual content living there at pghsportslive.com, or the mothership, pittsburghsportsnow.com. or PittsburghHockeyNow.com, PittsburghSoccerNow.com, maybe even a new one coming soon, maybe even a Steelers one coming soon for a little foreshadowing and a tease. But any of our family of networks, any of our websites, and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. And when you do, you'll see those Tomlin clips if you didn't see them on the show. So there are several clips from Mike Tomlin's press conference. I throw them up there every week when I get the best cookies in town. The best cookies. I told my girlfriend, whenever we get married, I'm going to hire the cookie chef from the Steelers facility. And the ones at the facility, not even at the stadium, but at the facility, just perfect cookies. So if you ever have a chance to get there or get them from him, I don't know if that's possible if you're not credentialed, probably not, or on the team. But still, try to get them from a friend or just take my word for it and be jealous because you don't get those incredible cookies on a weekly basis. And today, even during the press conference, was National Cookie Day, I believe. So I got the best cookies around on the national celebration of the cookie. Great food spread today, too, for the press conference. But I always throw him up there. There's some clips about him talking about his familiarity with John Gruden, coaching under him during the Super Bowl year with the Buccaneers, and even the rest of that staff, from former Bengals coach now being with the Raiders, and the challenges and even the advantages of that, and got emotional when discussing the 1-year anniversary of Ryan Shazier's serious injury that career-threatening and potentially still hasn't seen him get back on the field, but what he's meant to this team and to Mike Tomlin personally to still be around these guys every day and be a part of this ride, whether he's playing or not. Sometimes you get news broken there, as I said, and that was today. Well, James Conner will be out against Oakland. He'll be out again in the Raiders game, suffering an injury in that Charger loss, and now the doomsday scenario when Bell didn't report is here. So maybe it won't matter for the Raiders, who are a struggling bunch, but they are without Conner too much down the stretch, too long-term, certainly in the playoffs. It's going to be a big problem because they're going running back by committee. That was Tomlin's news as well so far, with 1 week out of James Conner in that game against Oakland. Get it all there at Pittsburgh Sports Live. But really, in closing, to wrap things up, the referees weren't good. I mean, I can't lie. They weren't good. You can paint with a broad brush or however we want to throw those strokes out there, as someone would say. They weren't good. You can't defend him. He'll get fined. He won't say it. I can. They're not going to find me. The referees weren't good. It was a rough night at the office for them. They missed some calls. They did impact the game. The calls were significant enough they did impact the game. But, and this is key, but your first order of business after this loss, when the Steelers lead 23-7 and then eventually blow that lead, shouldn't be to blame the referees. They're not the number one target. The team, the players, the coaches, they're not going to make excuses and say it's the referee's fault. We blew a 16-point 23-7 lead at home. It's not the referee's fault they blew that lead. The Steelers, despite the referees having a rough night and missing calls, the Steelers still had many opportunities to win that game. The Steelers are still who to blame for why they didn't win that game. The Steelers' defense collapsed at the end of that game in the second half. Ben missed a guaranteed touchdown earlier in that game, and if he built that lead more, they wouldn't have mattered with the defense collapse, and they would have won that game. Ben can take some of the blame. Tomlin messing up a challenge, once again losing a timeout towards the end of the game, making another comeback effort more difficult. The Steelers offsides repeatedly during the Chargers' game-winning attempt. Certainly 2 out of those 3, if not all 3, and I would go all 3, on the Steelers and their game plan, way too obvious. But it shouldn't have got to that point. It shouldn't have mattered. It shouldn't get down to a game-winning field goal for the Chargers when you lead at 1 point by 16, 23-7. So we can go on and on here. You want to blame the refs? You want to throw your jokes up there on social media? Fine. Maybe I'll enjoy some of them like I did with the this is my favorite. I think this one deserves a second plug. A look at the refs from the Steelers game tonight. Some seeing eye dogs, some blind referees. They have the blind dark glasses on there, even the stick to walk around with on the field. They can't see. They're missing calls over the place, missing the blocks in the back. That's a good one. But in all seriousness, the other tweets that I won't give any more publicity to, that you can just find on searching Steelers and refs on Twitter. When you say the referees cost them the game, the referees robbed them, when you're calling for a conspiracy, when you're tweeting me back and forth after the game on how the referees are to blame and nothing else I'm giving you on the team, missing a touchdown, missing tackles on the return, going offsides, or just blowing the big lead at home and letting it get to a field goal. None of that's getting through to your head there. None of that's getting into the skull. I mean, come on. Referees had a rough night, but they're not to blame. They're not the focus. They're not the number one target. The Steelers blew that game. That's inexcusable, unacceptable. A 23-7 lead. You should beat anybody, anywhere, especially at home, especially if you think you're a championship contender. But now they move on. The Steelers move on. They won't make excuses. They move on. They now have another must-win against the Raiders. And that's a bad team, not a contending team, but they need to win the game to keep their positioning in the AFC and not have to have road playoff games. Certainly the AFC Championship game like they've had to do in recent years, which costs them when they're having to go on the road to New England and they can't beat the Patriots on the road and then they don't go to the Super Bowl. And same thing seems to be happening here. Wash, rinse, and repeat. So a must-win game, absolutely, especially after the last few weeks. But they're not going to make excuses. They're not going to blame the refs. The refs might miss calls again, but if you have a 16-point lead, even on the road then, you can't blow it if you think you're a playoff team, if you think you're a winning team, and if you think you're a championship contender, as the Steelers do. That's their aspirations, so that's the standard I'm holding them to. Blame the refs all you want, but you're misguided, and the refs had a rough go, but they're just not to blame. Once again, make sure to click subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live for all this content is promoted there. Follow me at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter. Make sure to find all our websites in the family of networks. Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, Pittsburgh Sports Now for the mothership, and PGHSportsLive.com, where I put up all this golden quality content for you to live, archive forever, or until we take it down. A little aside there. And even future sites there, some foreshadowing, future Steelers site potentially popping up there in the future and make it easy for us to get the content to you. Click subscribe, click the subscribe button on the Pittsburgh Sports Live YouTube channel. So the refs not to blame, even though that's the sexy thing to do right now. The Steelers need to be better. Pressure's on Pittsburgh in a must-win against a bad team. I don't care what the lead is. I don't care what's going on with the defense or the referees. You got to find a way, and especially if you get a big lead against a bad team. I don't care the calls from the referees. No excuses. You must win. But the Steelers now have the pressure to conquer themselves. they now have some pressure to conquer. Regardless of whether they do or not, I will conquer sports radio one day at a time.